The 5 biggest mistakes that I see leaders make that I am urging you not to make in 2023. And believe me, if you follow this advice, you're going to see a drastic increase on your team's engagement. My name is 𝗵𝗵𝗴𝗵, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a remote hybrid team performance coach. I specialize in supporting leaders and their teams in reducing burnout, improving engagement, and creating workplaces that people really freaking enjoy. That's what it's all about, right? Life's too short. So make sure that you subscribe and follow along on my channel, where I post a video every week around leadership tips and remote team tips. So don't forget to subscribe. But today I want to talk to you about the 5 biggest mistakes that I see leaders make time and time again. Oftentimes when I work with leaders and organizations, they ask me about the strategies and the different concepts that they could use and what the best tech company in the world is doing with their employees to reduce burnout, to increase engagement. And it's not about what other people are doing. It's not even necessarily about continuously creating something brand new for your team. Really, the most important thing, and what I see missing all of the time in my work, is that leaders and organizations are making mistakes around the foundational principles of managing and supporting teams. And that's exactly what I'm going to share with you today. These are strategies that you can implement immediately, and it's not going to cost you anything except for your time. And that's empowering in itself. So maybe you're a leader there that's listening to this and you're really struggling. I know what that's like. You're struggling maybe with your own motivations, with your own stress levels, maybe with your team stress levels, and you're trying to Google all of these different ideas for how you can engage your team. Stop doing that. Stop looking outside of yourself for the answers. Come back to basics. So, on that note, I want to introduce you to the first mistake that I see leaders make. The first mistake that I see leaders make is that they are spending little to no time in one-to-one conversations with their team members. They're not consistent with them. They reschedule them. They deprioritize them. And when they do meet one-to-one, they're using that time to check up rather than check in. And what do I mean by that? They're using that time spent in a one-to-one talking about projects, talking about updates. What have you been working on since we last spoke? That is one of the quickest ways that you will miss something within your team. And what do I mean by miss? You're not going to actually hear what's going on in your team. You're not going to hear their frustrations, their real challenges, their ideas, their creative concepts. When you're missing all of those things, something happens along the line where it's not that trust is broken, but the connection is broken. And especially if you're working remotely, this is even more important. So what can you do to change it? Number 1, have consistent one-to-ones. Have it in the calendar, prioritize it. It does not change. You can also start to look at the agenda of that one-to-one. Okay, there might be things that you need to discuss about work. Fair. But why don't you open up that conversation with a coaching question? Hey, team member, before I jump into the things we want to discuss today, I want to take some time to coach you and to support you and to hear what's going on. So what is it that is the most important topic for you to talk about today? What would you like to walk away with after this meeting? It can be anything got to do with work or your professional development or some challenges that you're facing. What's going to be the most helpful for you? Recapping on number 1. Consistent one-to-ones, quality one-to-ones, and using that time to coach your team as opposed to checking up on their work. Number 2, the biggest mistake that I see leaders make on their team is not providing their team member with clarity around what's expected of them when it comes to roles and responsibilities. And the likelihood is, when you hired your team members, there was a job description that was created, maybe by you or somebody else internally. And that has gathered dust over the last couple of months, couple of years, and it hasn't been looked at. But also, your team members' role and their responsibilities has probably changed. And what happens when people don't know what's fully expected of them and how they can be successful in the eyes of the organization, in the eyes of the team, and they don't know how to measure that? They work with an underlying current of productivity anxiety, whether it's conscious or unconscious. And what can happen here is that people actually overwork and try to do it all because they don't know if they're doing enough. And a prime example of this was in 2020 when a lot of people shifted to remote work. So many people said to me, Shauna, I'm just working all the time, because I'm afraid that people think I'm not working. So supporting your team and understanding you are successful when, how, and this is how you can measure yourself. And by the way, this is how we are measuring ourselves as a team, as individuals. And this brings calmness into the nervous system. When we are calm in our nervous system, we're more creative. We can think straighter. We are also nicer to be around, and we problem solve better. There's so much benefit to doing that. And that's something you could bring up in a one-to-one conversation, right? Relating to point one is asking your team member, how much clarity do you have on what's expected of you right now? Would it be helpful for us to review your key responsibilities and what success looks like in this current position that you're in? And see what happens. Number 3 biggest mistake. You ready for this one? It's a good one. Workload management. And you might be like, well, how? I mean, the workload is just so high. I don't even know what to do. And that's fair, but the workload will continue to be high and feel probably even higher at times if it's not centralized in a place where there is transparency, where there is insight into levels of capacity. Okay, so this is the biggest mistake I see leaders make, is that number one, they don't know how long something will actually take a team member, and they keep delegating, keep giving stuff over to them. And what happens is the team member gets overwhelmed, rightly so. There's so many tasks, so many things to do, so little time, I'll just keep working, right? Then we burn out. Instead of doing that, instead of having workloads and priorities in your head, first and foremost, as a leader, get your own workload down on paper. And there's so many great tools out there. Notion have free versions, ClickUp. I use ClickUp myself, Monday.com. The list goes on. And maybe you're already using some of those tools already. You're just not using them for your workload. So even if you write your tasks down on paper, which a lot of my clients do, have it in a centralized place that can be visible. Then you also want to look on a team level. What's going on a team level? Can we have that centralized place where we have that high level overview of what's going on, what's to be done, what's in progress, and what's been completed and needs reviewed? And what you're also going to do is you're going to support your team to have the safety to be able to do that for themselves as individuals. So you're empowering them to be able to, step back and say, thanks for delegating that to me, but right now I have this amount of capacity. Or when I'm able to do this, I'll be able to get this to you by Friday next week. So they're empowered to be able to say no, say yes, say not yet, and come to you to say, leader, I'm a bit overwhelmed right now. I've been delegated these 4 tasks. They're all due at the same time. Can you help me prioritize? Why do we want that? If the message is not clear right now, I want to just state this. Why do we want that? Number 1, we want safety. We want our teams to be able to come to us to say, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me out? Number 2, we want to be able to support them and have the skills, the resources, the knowledge to be able to help them do that. Number 3, if we don't do that, if that's not happening and the team member is feeling overwhelmed and is struggling, and that is something that is more consistent and keeps going, and that cycle never ends, and you don't have that conversation, your team member will progress to the end stages of burnout, and it's going to affect so much. So we want to create that safety. We want technology to be able to support us and the tools around us to support us with that. And we want our team to be empowered. Okay, so the fourth biggest mistake that I see leaders make, and this is one where the ego, our friend the ego, gets heavily involved. And the ego prevents us from stepping into our truest potential as leaders and helping our team step into their truest potential. So the mistake that I see being made by leaders is that they try to fix all of their team's problems. So what they might do is, some examples, a team member might come with a question, they need something solved, and instead of coaching them to find a solution, they give them the answer. Or a team member might make a mistake or something isn't up to par as to what it needs to be. And instead of coaching that team member and helping them see that and improve that or make something better, they do it themselves, and they tell themselves it's easier to do it this way. And sometimes it is. If things are a priority, if things are, a really urgent deadline and they need to be done tomorrow or today, fair enough. You can jump in and you can kind of get into the nitty-gritty of whatever it is. But long term, if that's what you continue to do, you're making a mistake around having your team reliant on you all of the time. So you're going to continue to be overwhelmed with the amount of questions, support needed from your team. So you're not going to be able to make the most impact because your workload's high. You're never probably going to be able to feel okay to take a break either. And the second thing, the cost to your team of this. Think about what the cost to your team is. The cost is that if you keep swooping in and fixing and saving them, then they are not going to step into their highest potential. They're limited in terms of their growth, in terms of their development, and they might have a subconscious belief somewhere back here that you don't really trust them. So really starting to look at, where are you swooping in and where could you swap that out for some coaching this year in 2023. Okay, and the fifth and final mistake, I would say the most important, but to be totally honest, all of these 5 points are incredibly important. And the fifth point is leaders that are not leading by example. I know that term, right? It might be overused. But no, seriously, when we look at the level of influence that leaders have, and I write about this in my book, Managing Employee Burnout, there's actually a whole chapter dedicated to leading by example. It is that freaking important. And I have worked with leaders that have had extreme issues around burnout on their team. And instead of trying to fix the team, I look at the leader first and I work with the leader and I get the leader to start to look after their own well-being and show up with really healthy boundaries and prioritizing that. And what happens from that is that leaders see the impact on their team. The team start following suit. That's what will naturally happen. So for example, if you're not taking a lunch break and you're telling your team to take a lunch break, they're not going to take a lunch break. If you are preaching all day, every day to your team that they need to work less and not take as many meetings, but you yourself are working more and consumed by meetings all day, every day, it's not going to happen. So it's like having to put on your own oxygen mask first. When I work with leaders, they struggle with this piece because they don't want to think about themselves. They want to help other people. It's like, well, why am I looking after myself when my team need me? And I get that. I get that that's coming from a place of care. It really is. And I admire that. But look at it from a couple of levels up. It's not supporting you. You're not going to be able to be present with your team members and effective at your job if you are not prioritizing yourself, if you don't have any oxygen. The same for your team, right? It's like when we're kids, right? We follow suit to what our parents do, and we take on some of their behaviors or some of their habits, whether that's good or bad. It doesn't matter. That's what we look to. It's the same for our team members. It becomes the norm. And The second reason why I burnt out, and I explain this in my book, which is in the link below if you want to purchase a copy. The second time I burnt out, it was because I had a leader that never switched off. And this leader worked across time zones, and I was getting pinged throughout the night. I was also getting pinged on weekends, on Sundays, with a new creative idea. And it became the norm of the culture on our team where people were just on all the time. And that's a very extreme example. And I really hope for those of you listening to this, that's not the case for you. If it is, there's still hope, of course. But, that really is an extreme. But even those micro moments where we show up out of alignment has the impact to influence our team. So there you go. They're the 5 biggest mistakes, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do subscribe to my channel. I post weekly videos here all around leadership development, team development. Ultimately, my mission is creating the world with workplaces where everybody can thrive, everybody can be happy, and I want to reduce the Sunday scaries. I don't want anyone dreading their work and their environment. And believe me, if you start making the changes that I spoke about today in this video, you will start to see the impact. And of course, I would love to know how these things go for you. If you've any questions, ideas for videos upcoming, please feel free to get in touch in the comments below. And finally, if you're looking for support as a leader, I have a new program that I've launched in 2023 to support managers become transformational leaders. It's a 12-month program with ongoing coaching, training, support, and community. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, the link is in the window below. Have a look at the program. Let me know if that's something that would interest you. I'd love to have you there in this container where we're going to dive into just even all of these topics today. It's much more in depth. So imagine what you can learn when you take this and you get coached on some of the blockers that you've had. Because I know from listening to these mistakes, you've probably felt blocked in your own thinking at some point. Well, that wouldn't work for me, or how would I do that? The Level Up Leadership program is going to support you with removing those blockers. So I'd love to have you there. And thank you for listening to the video today. I'll talk to you soon.